Hi, I'm Eric Andelin with Kittyhawk. I'm a solutions architect, and I want to show you a few new features that include roles and permissions, risk assessments, checklists, and workflows. So let's look at how we build these and add them to our workflows. So let's start by going into the management page, and we will look at roles and permissions first. So roles and permissions, pretty basic. In your enterprise organization, you're going to have a primary admin role. And this role, for example, grants all access to Kittyhawk, allows you to build checklists, risk assessments, so forth. And then with that, you can add additional roles. Like, for example, we have a new onboarding role here in this account, and that's for new users. We don't want them digging too far into the system, accidentally pushing the wrong button and executing something like moving admins out or so forth. So we have a default role for new user onboarding. Then you would also maybe have an external pilot role. If you have 1,000 people in your account and 200 of those are external pilots, you may not want them having as much access as your internal crew. And then another example would be like a security flight team. So in this case, we're going to work with the primary admin role because that's where I belong and I need to be in that role. I'll explain that later. If you wanted to create a new role, you go up here to add role. So we have roles and permissions figured out. The next thing we're going to look at is risk assessments. So a risk assessment is similar to a checklist, except a risk assessment adds a weighted value to the questions and answers. And based on that weighted value, you can determine if the risk is appropriate for executing a mission or a flight. And in this case, we've got a risk assessment already built for urban acquisition. If we wanted to create a new one, again, we go up here to add risk assessment. But let's look at urban acquisition. So this one was created earlier. It has, as it shows up here, 3 sections, 9 questions with a 22-point maximum. And as you look at these, you can see where they're leading. Does this mission occur in Class G airspace? Yes would be 1, no would be 2. Is it a LANC authorization available? And so on and so forth. The location, are you flying over people? Do you have a waiver? And so forth. And then pilot information, do you have hours on this airframe? And what's going to happen is when you run this, it's going to give you a score based on your questions. And then you can say, okay, at that threshold, am I willing to take this flight, or should I redo the risk assessment and basically reset and start over, maybe move to a different location, something like that. If we wanted to edit these, we can just push the edit button. And now you can see we can scroll down and we can add a section. We can add a question. So for example, if I wanted to add a question here, are you something like that. Sorry for the spelling, physically healthy. And then you could answer that and rate it. Did you have a headache? Something like that. You can add that to the risk assessment. But in this case, I don't need it. We'll go with what we have, and I'll save this. We also have checklists. So checklists are similar to risk assessments, but they're more about, are you following the SOP that your organization has designed as a PIC? So is the aircraft flight worthy? Is the area clear to fly? Those type of things. So let's look at, for example, the Mavic Pro checklist that we built, and you build these yourself. So for example, here you've got unboxing information, launch point information, and so forth. If we wanted to edit that, again, we could do that. If I want to move this step below the other, we can do that. It'll save it, and we've got a checklist there. And what we're trying to do is build these so that when the pilot goes into the air control in-flight experience, the app to fly the aircraft, before executing the flight, it will trigger these risk assessments and checklists. But to do that, we have to build a workflow. So let me close this and we'll look at workflows. So a workflow basically creates those functions that have to happen before the drone is allowed to take off. So again, we could add a workflow here, but I've already built this one. This is a demo workflow, and we'll show you what we have here. So in the demo workflow, and I'll go ahead and hit edit. The first thing we have to do is assign a role, because when the pilot connects to air control, the in-flight experience, when they connect to that, it's going to know what role that person has within the enterprise. And based on that role, it knows that it needs to apply these steps in this workflow that we're building. So we'll use the primary admin role, and that's everybody, and I'm in that as well. The risk assessment, we have just the one, so we've got that built in there. We can make it mandatory or we can leave it optional. Actually, it's mandatory right now. We could make it optional. And all that does is allow you to skip it if you want to skip it. And then we have our checklist. It shows all of the checklists that we have built. The one I want to run is the Mavic Pro checklist. And then at the end, it's going to enter in-flight mode. So as we look at it this way, we'll just hit save. Here's what it looks like. When the app is opened and connected to the drone and you push the fly button, it is going to go to the risk assessment. It's going to make you run through that. Then it's going to go through the checklist. It's going to make you run through that. Then when you've completed that and you hit end, now you're in in-flight mode and you can take off. So again, the challenge here is this is kind of a little bit of a layer cake. You want to make sure that your roles and permissions are set first. Then you want to build your risk assessments and your checklists. And of course, you can have as many as you want. And then you want to assign that again to a workflow so that it looks like this. Once this is all complete, that is saved. And when the pilot goes into the in-flight experience, they are going to run into these checklists. Once the pilot has completed his mission, he's landed, he's added the information he wants, he's accepted that the mission is done, everything's shut down, we can go back into Kittyhawk and we can see that these checklists have been run because we keep, again, logs, just like we have a flight log. We now have logs of our checklists and our risk assessments. So if we look here, we can see that I was out flying earlier today. I ran the risk assessment. It gave me a score of 59. To me, that was good enough to fly. So I went ahead and continued with the flight. And then again, the same for the checklist log. Once I completed the mission, here we have the checklist log and it shows which version it was, what date and time I ran it, and then I can connect to the flight via this link and actually see the flight that was completed. As you've seen before, it shows a live stream map, or not a live stream map, but a live map of the flight, which you can see here. And yeah, this is just a test flight, but it shows you the path, shows Shows you how long I was flying, which aircraft, which batteries, the weather conditions, and here in my flight notes, noticing that I did test for the checklist. And again, here they are, that I did complete these checklists and the risk assessment. So what we're doing here is we're managing risk for the company. We are making sure that, for insurance purposes, we have to log this information. We may have to provide it on a quarterly or a monthly basis. Again, the goal here is to make your operation as if it was an aircraft operation, because we are flying in that airspace, albeit at a lower altitude. Safety is a priority, and minimizing risk is what we want to do here. And containing all of this in a service such as Kittyhawk is, where we would like everybody to be, and how we choose to help our other UAS pilots out there.